Now we will talk about histology of the organs of oral cavity. And here we can see anatomical picture which shows us different structures of the oral cavity, and we can find here different organs. So first of all, oral cavity, it includes oral cavity proper, and also it has vestibule, which is located between the lips and teeth with gums. Here we can see vestibule of oral cavity. And oral cavity, it has different organs. There are teeth, there are gums, lips, cheeks, hard and soft palate, and also there is tongue. And today we will talk about those organs. And oral cavity is the beginning of the digestive tube. It's the first compartment of the digestive tube. Its anterior compartment. It develops from the ectoderm. Its epithelial lining. It has ectodermal origin. And lining of the oral cavity is called oral mucosa. Let's look at the wall of digestive tube, typical wall of digestive tube. It has mucosa, epithelium, lamina propria, loose fibrous connective tissue, and muscularis mucosa. They form mucosa of digestive tube. Its typical structure. Epithelium may be different. Under the epithelium we have lamina propria, its loose fibrous connective tissue, and under the epithelium we have a thin layer of loose fibrous connective tissue, of smooth muscular tissue, which forms muscularis mucosa. Deeper under the mucosa, we have submucosa. It's loose fibrous connective tissue which maintains mucosa, so it's called submucosa. Deeper, we have muscularis externa. It has usually two layers, inner circular and outer longitudinal, and it may be composed of two types of muscular tissue. It may be smooth muscular tissue or skeletal muscular tissue. And the outermost layer may be adventitia or serosa, according to the localization of this part of the digestive tube. So here we can see typical structure of the digestive tube, which includes oral cavity, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine. Four membranes, it's mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa or adventitia. And now let's look at a lining of the oral cavity, and this lining is called oral mucosa. So what specific is in the oral cavity? So first of all, inner epithelium, lining epithelium of oral cavity is stratified squamous keratinized. This epithelium has ectodermal origin, and it's stratified to provide protection of the organs of oral cavity and protection of the underlying tissues from the mechanical damage by food. Under this epithelium, we also have lamina propria. Lamina propria is also loose fibrous connective tissue, which maintains the epithelium. It contains blood vessels, it contains nerves, immune cells. So it's supportive layer. Connective tissues also they follows all epithelia, and it's essential layer which is located under all epithelia. So it's lamina propria. Deeper we have another layer, it's submucosa. It's also loose fibrous connective tissue, and a border between lamina propria and submucosa isn't clear. Look here, in typical digestive mucosa, we have muscularis mucosa, which is composed of smooth myocytes, but muscularis mucosa isn't well developed in the oral cavity. So we don't see clear border between mucosa and submucosa. That's why in some textbooks you can find the information that oral mucosa hasn't, submucosa is absent. But usually it's described that submucosa also is present, but scientists have decided that in those places where oral mucosa is mobile, submucosa is present because it provides mobility of mucosa above the underlying tissues. And when mucosa is immobile, so mucosa is absent. So you can compare mobility of mucosa, for example, on gums. It's immobile because it's closely attached to the underlying bone, and for example, mucosa under your tongue, and in those places it's very mobile because there is a jelly-like substance under the mucosa. It's submucosa which provides mobility of mucosa, and this jelly-like substance, it's loose fibrous connective tissue of submucosa. So when we have mobility of mucosa, we say that we have submucosa in those regions. And immobilized mucosa, it hasn't submucosa because lamina propria of mucosa is attached to the underlying tissues. And deeper, usually in digestive tube, we have muscularis externa, but in oral cavity we haven't this layer. We have here or bone or different facial muscles, muscles of face, which underlie oral mucosa. So mucosa and submucosa, they are attached to the underlying tissues, and muscularis externa and serosa and adventitia, they are absent in this region. So in oral cavity, we have only mucosa, which has epithelium and lamina propria. Muscularis mucosa is almost absent, and also there is submucosa. But border between mucosa and submucosa isn't clear, and submucosa is present in those regions of oral mucosa where it's mobile. And now let's look at the layers. So oral mucosa, it has epithelium, stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, lamina propria, it's loose fibrous connective tissue, and under mucosa we have submucosa, it's loose fibrous connective tissue, main layers of oral mucosa. And it has simple structure. You should remember three basic layers. It's epithelium, lamina propria of mucosa, and under mucosa we have submucosa. And here we can see structure of oral mucosa. It's epithelium, it's lamina propria, and deeper we have submucosa. It's structure of oral mucosa. And now let's look at oral epithelium. Here we can see basal layer. It is located on the basal membrane. Next, it's intermediate layer, and we have also superficial layer. So we have three basic layers of the oral epithelium. Under the epithelium, we have basal membrane and lamina propria, and there are layers of oral epithelium. It's stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. It has surface or superficial layer. It has intermediate layer, and it has basal layer. Three basic layers of oral epithelium. And under the oral epithelium, we have lamina propria. It's loose fibrous connective tissue. It's oral epithelium of oral mucosa. And here we can see a histological slide which shows the oral mucosa and its basal layer. It's located on the basal membrane and it provides regeneration. Next layer, it's intermediate and superficial layer or surface layer. It's the most superficial layer which is composed of squamous cells. And here we can see oral mucosa, typical oral mucosa, and superficial layer, it's epithelium. Under this epithelium, we have lamina propria, and deeper we have submucosa. Epithelium and lamina propria is oral mucosa, and submucosa underlies oral mucosa. And deeper we have bone or the muscles of the face, which form oral cavity. And epithelium with lamina propria, they form mucosa, and we can see here junction of epithelium and lamina propria. Lamina propria, it forms papilla of oral mucosa. It's baby contour, and there are papilla. In lamina propria and submucosa, we have blood vessels, and blood vessels, they form plexus of papilla, and it provides blood supply. And also there are nerves which enter in the oral epithelium, which enter in the oral mucosa, and they provide innervation and sensitivity of oral mucosa. Also, glands are present in oral mucosa, and also lymphoid cells, and they provide immune support of the oral mucosa. So it's typical structure of oral mucosa. Glands, small salivary glands, they aren't only parotid glands, sublingual, some vestibular glands, which are glands organs. Also, there are very small salivary glands which are present in lamina propria, in connective tissue of lamina propria, and also they are present in submucosa, and they produce saliva in small amounts, and it's released on the surface of the oral epithelium. And this typical structure of mucosa is called lining mucosa. It has well-developed submucosa, and it's most commonly distributed type of mucosa. Another type is masticatory mucosa. It participates in mastication, and let's compare these types of mucosa. In this type, we have well-developed submucosa, and in this type, submucosa is absent, and lamina propria is directly attached to the underlying bone or to underlying tissues. And here we can see direct connection of mucosa to underlying tissues. And also lamina propria, it is denser than in this case. It has numerous collagen fibers which provide density of this masticatory mucosa. It may be found on the hard palate, especially midline of hard palate, and you can touch this region, and you can see that this mucosa, you can feel that this mucosa is immobile, and it's dense because it's attached to the underlying bone. And also this masticatory mucosa is present. It covers gums. It forms the gums, gingiva, and also mucosa in those regions is immobile. It's needed to provide mastication because mobile mucosa may be damaged during mastication. It may be damaged by food. But almost all other places, they have lining mucosa. So we have two basic types of mucosa. Oral mucosa, it's lining mucosa. Also, we have masticatory mucosa, and third type, it's specialized mucosa, which covers upper surface of tongue. It's sensory mucosa. It has special sensory cells which form taste buds, and it provides sense of taste. So sensory or specialized mucosa. So we have three basic types of oral mucosa. Lining mucosa, it lines all places except those which are lined with masticatory and sensory mucosa. Masticatory mucosa covers, it forms gums, it's gingiva, it forms midline of hard palate, and also we have sensory mucosa which covers upper and lateral surfaces of tongue, and it provides sensation of taste. It provides taste sensation. And here we can see lining mucosa with well-developed submucosa. It's masticatory mucosa with well-developed collagen fibers which attach it to underlying bone, and also there is sensory mucosa. And now let's talk about histology of cheek. First organ of the oral cavity, it's cheek. So here we can see layered structure of cheek, and let's talk about layers which form this cheek. So the outermost layer of cheek, it's skin epidermis. It stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. It forms outer surface of cheek. Under the epidermis, we have dermis, which has a papillary layer and reticular layer. They are formed by fibrous connective tissue. And under the skin, we have a muscle. Here we can see a muscle of cheek. It's buccal muscle. So there are cheek muscles, facial muscles, which form basis of cheek. And also in children in this region we have well-developed adipose tissue. Next layer it's submucosa of oral mucosa, and also we have lamina propria, and also we have epithelium of oral mucosa. So innermost layer is mucosa and submucosa. Here we can see cheek muscles and skin. There are three basic layers which form cheek structure. And here we can see regions of cheek, and it has anatomical zones. We have here maxillary zone, which which corresponds to the maxilla, and it develops from maxillary processes during embryogenesis. We have mandibular zone, which develops from mandibular processes during embryogenesis, and between them we have transitional zone, zone of the attachment of maxillary and mandibulary processes. It's transitional zone of cheek, and this zone, transitional zone, it corresponds to the line of teeth occlusion. It's a place of embryonic attachment of maxilla and mandibula, of maxillary and mandibulary processes, and we can find here fold of mucosa, so it's transitional zone of cheek. And now we are going to lip histology. And lip, it has similarities with cheek, and here we can see that it has mucosal zone, its inner surface of lip, its transitional zone, and its dermal zone, outer surface of lip. Transitional zone, it's those region of lip which has red shades, where ladies usually apply lipstick. It's transitional zone, its skin, outer surface of lip, and its mucosal zone. And here we can see dermal zone, transitional, and mucosal zone. In mucosal zone, we have typical structure of the oral lining mucosa with small salivary glands which produce saliva. Dermal zone, it has hair follicles, so it's typical skin with epidermis. Also, there are hair follicles, sebaceous, sweat glands, and transitional zone. It's zone of transition from skin to mucosa. There are well-developed papilla which have very good blood supply, and this blood and thin epithelium results in the red shade of this transitional zone. And also keratinized epithelium transits into non-keratinized, and this zone desquamation may occur because in this region keratinized and non-keratinized epithelia meet each other, and it may cause desquamation of keratin layer. And here we can see out its dermal zone, its inner mucosal zone. So lip has a lot of similarities with cheeks, but also it has transitional zone which corresponds to the transition from epithelium of skin to epithelium of oral mucosa. And different glands are found in different zones. Here we have sebaceous and sweat glands, and in the inner zone we have mucosal glands. They are salivary glands which produce saliva inside the oral cavity. And basis of the lip, it's musculus orbicularis oris, it's facial muscle which forms the basis of lip. So we have skin, we have lip muscles, and we have mucosa and submucosa on the inner surface of lip. And three zones: dermal, transitional, and mucosal. Here we can see cutaneous surface, its oral surface, and its transitional zone. And here we can see salivary glands, which correspond to oral surface. And now we are going to the structure of palate. We have two regions of palate. It's hard palate, which has bony bases, and also we have soft palate, which has muscular and fibrous bases. This basis is formed by skeletal muscles and dense fibrous connective tissue. So it's hard and soft palate. And let's look at histology of hard and soft palate. So hard palate, it has layered structure, and let's go from the oral cavity to the nasal cavity. Hard palate, it separates oral and nasal cavity, as well as soft palate. So it's oral cavity, oral surface, and it's nasal cavity and nasal surface. And we are going from oral cavity to the nasal cavity. So in oral cavity, hard palate is covered with oral epithelium. It's stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Under this epithelium, we have lamina propria of oral mucosa. Here we can see it. Deeper, we have submucosa. It's loose fibrous connective tissue which is present also in lamina propria of oral mucosa. Deeper, we have bone, palatal bone, which forms basis of hard palate, or also palatal bones and maxillary bones, palatal processes of maxillary bones, they form hard palate. And also on the nasal surface, we have nasal mucosa. It's lamina propria of nasal mucosa and nasal epithelium, which is pseudostratified ciliated columnar. Here we can see nasal epithelium. So it's layered structure of hard palate. It's covered with mucosa on two sides. On the nasal side, it's nasal epithelium and nasal mucosa, and on oral surface, it's oral epithelium and oral mucosa. It's layered structure of hard palate. And here you can see oral surface and nasal surface and bony basis of hard palate. And hard palate, it has anatomical regions, and let's look and let's list them. So hard palate, it has marginal zone, which transits into the gums, into gingiva. It forms margins of hard palate. Also, there is midline of hard palate. It's adipose zone and glandular zone. Here we can see main regions of hard palate. So what are the features of those zones? Marginal zone and midline of hard palate, they are covered with masticatory type of mucosa. So in this region, submucosa is absent and mucosa is closely attached to the underlying bone. So mucosa in these regions is immobile in the marginal zone and on the midline of hard palate. In the adipose zone here and in the glandular zone, submucosa is present. In adipose zone, it's located here. It is rich with adipose tissue. There is well-developed adipose tissue in the adipose zone and in the glandular zone. Here, we have numerous salivary glands which are present in submucosa mainly. So there are main anatomical zones of hard palate. Marginal zone and midline of hard palate, they are lined with masticatory type of mucosa, and lining oral mucosa covers adipose and glandular zone. Adipose zone has well-developed adipose tissue in submucosa, and glandular zone, it has well-developed salivary glands. And soft palate, it also has layers which are similar to hard palate, but the only difference here is basis. It's fibromuscular basis. It's composed of dense connective tissue and skeletal muscle, which form the basis of soft palate. So let's list the layers of soft palate. The innermost layer is oral epithelium of oral mucosa. Next, it's lamina propria of oral mucosa. Next, it's submucosa. So it's a lining oral mucosa. Next, it's fibromuscular base. It's skeletal muscle of soft palate and also fibrous membrane, which is formed by dense connective tissue. Also, we have nasal mucosa, which has lamina propria, and nasal epithelium. It's pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelium. So here we can see layered structure of soft palate, and it has almost the same structure as hard palate, but only difference is middle part of soft palate or hard palate. Hard palate, it has bony base, and soft palate, it has muscular base. which maintains mucosa from two sides, from oral cavity and from nasal cavity. And now we are going to gums, histology of gums, or they are called gingiva. Gums are formed by masticatory type of oral mucosa, submucosa is absent, and mucosa, lamina propria of oral mucosa is rich with collagen fibers, which provide density of gingiva. And here we can see regions of this oral gingiva of gums, and we have adherent gingiva. Uh, it's located here. Also, we have free gingiva, which forms margin. It forms fold near the teeth. And also we have interdental gingiva or interdental papilla, which are located between the teeth. And here we can see on right side we can see histological slide. It's drawing of histological slide, and we can see gingiva, its epithelium, and numerous collagen fibers. They are shown in violet, which are attached to alveolar bone, and also they are attached to the tooth, and they are maintained by the they are continued into tooth fibers, collagen fibers. And the last organ of oral cavity which we are going to discuss now, it's tongue. And now let's talk about tongue histology. So the base of the tongue, it's striated muscular tissue, skeletal muscular tissue. It forms the base of tongue. It has upper surface and lateral surfaces. They are covered with special sensory type of oral mucosa, and lower surface of tongue, it has well-developed submucosa, and it's a lining type of oral mucosa. So its general structure of tongue. It also has anatomical parts, its root, its body, and its apex of tongue. And let's go to histology. So upper and lateral surfaces of tongue, they have special type of oral mucosa. It's sensory type, and it forms tongue papilla, special processes of projections of oral mucosa. They have connective tissue base, which forms secondary papilla. It's primary and secondary papilla, and they are covered with epithelium. It's stratified squamous and keratinized epithelium of oral cavity. And also this epithelium has taste buds. They are present on two sides of tongue papilla. They provide a sense of taste. There are sensory cells which provide sensory function. And also here we can see muscles, striated muscles, which form bases of tongue. And there are numerous salivary glands, small salivary glands, which are located in the oral cavity, and they provide production of small amounts of saliva. And there are taste buds. They usually are present on the lateral sides of tongue papilla. Here you can see taste bud. It has three types of cells. The main cells are sensory cells. They are sensory epithelial cells which react to different tasty substances. Also, there are supportive cells which maintain sensory cells. And also there are basal cells which are stem cells, and they provide regeneration of sensory and supportive cells of taste buds. And we can see appearance of taste buds, so they are inclusions of sensory and supportive and basal cells between the typical epithelial cells of lining oral epithelium. Here we can see taste buds. And some tongue papilla, they don't have taste buds. For example, there are filiform papilla of tongue, and they provide general sensation. They provide sensation of touch, of vibration, and they don't provide sense of taste. So here we can see filiform papilla, and those filiform papilla, they have special keratin layer which covers them. It's number 2, and that's why epithelium in this region is particularly keratinized, because keratin layer is present. So we have four basic types of tongue papilla. There are filiform papilla, which are the most numerous, and they don't have taste buds. Here we can see filiform papilla. And also we have foliate, fungiform, and velate papilla. Uh, all those types, foliate, fungiform, and velate papilla, they have taste buds, so they provide taste sensation. Foliate are the smallest between them, fungiform are a little bit bigger, and velate papilla are the biggest. They are present between their body and root of tongue. Here we can see velate papilla. Uh, Fungiform are numerous and they are distributed on the surface of tongue, mainly near the apex. And you can take a mirror and look at your tongue, and you can find there fungiform papilla, small papilla distributed on the tongue. And foliate papilla aren't numerous and they are well developed in children, and in adults they usually are absent. So here we can see foliate papilla, they are the smallest. They have primary papilla of connective tissue and secondary, and they are covered with epithelium, and there are taste buds on the lateral surfaces of foliate papilla. Uh, Fungiform papilla and velate papilla are similar to foliate, but they have more numerous secondary papilla. They are bigger, and here we can see filiform papilla, foliate, the smallest. Fungiform, they are a little bit bigger, and it's filiform papilla which is particular characterization. Foliate, fungiform, and the biggest are velate papilla. They are surrounded with groove, and in this groove there are ducts of salivary glands which are opened in those grooves, and they release saliva in this region. So it's basic types of tongue papilla. Filiform, they don't have taste buds, but foliate, fungiform, and velate papilla, they have taste buds, and they are similar to each other, but foliate are the smallest, fungiform a little bit bigger, and velate papilla are the biggest.